Now you may be wondering what I'm doing here, hugging an exhaust after treatment system. What I'm doing here is actually developing further on the concept of hugging your engine. This is a concept that has been introduced by Dr. Kelly Senecal, and it's all about appreciating your internal combustion engine. Now at Dinex, obviously we also appreciate internal combustion engines, but in practice, the one thing we appreciate even more is these exhaust after treatment systems. Now, another thing that Dr. Kelly Senecal has done is writing this excellent book called Racing Towards Zero, the Untold Story of Driving Green. And we find that this book holds many valuable inputs on the green transition for the entire transport sector. The thing about this book is that it actually mostly covers passenger cars. So we were very pleased recently when our CTO Evangelos Georgiadis had the opportunity to make an exclusive interview with Dr. Kelly Senecal on his thoughts on the corresponding green transition for heavy-duty on-road and off-road vehicles. Apart from hugging engines and writing interesting books, he also does a lot of really cool other stuff, and he introduces this himself. You can see in the introduction to the interview here.
So my name is Kelly Senecal. I am a co-founder and owner of a CFD company, computational fluid dynamics, called CONVERGENT Science here in the United States. I'm actually sitting here in Madison, Wisconsin, talking to you today. I also have some academic positions. I'm a visiting professor at the University of Oxford. I'm an adjunct professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I've recently written a book called Racing Towards Zero, the Untold Story of Driving Green, which addresses a lot of the issues that we talk about all the time and we'll talk about today is from driving, right? If you drive an electric vehicle versus if you drive an internal combustion engine vehicle, how does that affect the climate? How does that affect health? What should we be doing in the future? And so on and so forth. So I have a lot of passion for the transportation industry and a lot of passion for computational fluid dynamics.
Thank you for providing us with some background and your impressive CV and career. Now, if we go into the discussion, first question I would like to ask you is that if we consider the automotive scene as a whole, how big of a role does the heavy-duty segment, both for on-road and off-road, play?
The heavy-duty segment is often overlooked for personal mobility. You know, light-duty passenger cars. This is what we see every day, right? And as consumers, this is what we own and operate. So the heavy-duty segment, though, is responsible for so many things that we rely on, right? The transport of food and goods, construction, agriculture. These are both on-road and off-road applications at work, improving our lifestyles and making sure we have the products we need when we need them, which is very important. So when we talk about improving the transportation sector, in terms of efficiency improvements, human health, climate impacts, we need to remember that heavy-duty plays a very important role and a very significant role.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question I would like to ask you. So now, if we start getting into the topic of green transition, and you talked about passenger cars and heavy duty a little bit in your first answer, but what differences do you see with respect to green transition and the environment between the sector of passenger cars and the sector of heavy duty commercial vehicles?
Yeah, I think currently we have more options when it comes to decarbonizing, you know, the passenger fleet, the light duty fleet. You know, if one lives in an area where the electricity is highly renewable, battery electric vehicles can go a long way to greening up your driving. People may be able to charge at home, which is an advantage, and they don't necessarily need a lot of range, right? A lot of people, they're just driving, you know, from home to work every day. Every once in a while, they may need to make a longer trip. On the other hand, in areas where electricity is still largely fossil fuel based, or the charging infrastructure is weak, hybrid vehicles with highly efficient engines can be a great option. Commercial vehicles, as you know, are larger and heavier. They often need much more range if we're talking about long haul transport, for example, or they need more time to do work in the field. They need additional infrastructure for charging. And here the diesel engine is really a great option. You know, it's been the preferred technology for years, and I would argue it's still the preferred technology. has high efficiency, its torque and power benefits, its durability, and unmatched range. Unlike passenger cars, batteries alone cannot provide the power needed for heavy duty applications. So that's a really important distinction between light duty and heavy duty. Advanced diesel engines, possibly hybridized with modern aftertreatment systems, are needed.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you. Now, if we look into this from a different dimension and we take the regulatory perspective, and how have the recent regulations and the regulatory updates, for example, in Europe, the US, how did this affect the commercial vehicle sector? What improvements did that bring, and can we see these improvements today?
That's a great question. So a combination of emissions regulations and industry innovation has really reduced the harmful emissions that come from not only light duty, but heavy duty commercial vehicles. By increasingly tightening the regulated levels of oxides of nitrogen, for example, or particulate matter, heavy duty engines are considerably cleaner than what they were, a few years ago, decades ago. This is because of enhancements within the engine itself, right? That's important. We want to clean up the processes, the combustion process within the engine. For example, fuel injection equipment, modern fuel injection equipment provides much cleaner and more efficient engines. But also the development of advanced aftertreatment systems, such as diesel oxidation catalysts, particulate filters, DPFs, selective catalytic reduction devices. And all of these things work together. And really what we need to remember is incremental changes over the years have really added up to significant improvements, not only in the climate impact of these vehicles, but also in the human health impact. It's also important to recognize that we haven't seen the full effect of current legislation yet. For example, in Europe, still some, 2/3 of heavy duty vehicles are pre-Euro 6. So when these are more or less phased out, say as we move towards 2030, the NOx emissions, for example, from this segment is expected to drop, maybe 90% compared to today. And that's without even inventing new technologies.
Yeah, that's really good points and very good insight. Thank you, Kelly. But I assume we have not, the industry has not gone the full way yet. There are still challenges, I believe, ahead of us, right? So what are the main challenges for the heavy duty sector towards this green transition targets and agenda?
Yeah, when it comes to decarbonizing the heavy duty sector, or any sector for that matter, I like to say it's not the engine that's the problem, it's the fuel. Right? So we just need to figure out how to go more and more renewable with the fuel, just as we're trying to go more and more renewable with our electrical grid, right? So it's the same kind of idea. We need to do it with our fuels. There are carbon-free, there are carbon-neutral options, such as hydrogen, e-fuels, biofuels. The biggest challenge, though, is how do we produce these fuels at scale? How do we produce them more efficiently? So this is a big challenge, and there's a lot of really great research in this area, and we definitely need to push this forward. What this also allows is to green up the existing fleet, right? So if you're just swapping out the fuel, you can use this in the existing fleet. We have the infrastructure in place, and you don't need to fully replace the fossil fuel, liquid fuel with renewable fuels. Any amount of replacement is huge for the climate.
So yeah, that's very interesting. Thanks for the answer, Kelly. So there are ways to approach this to decarbonize the industry, and I believe the industry, so us, we can do things to achieve this, to support this green transition, and then there is also the regulatory bodies who can also support this green transition. So, but if we start from the industry, so what contribution can we have to support?
That's a great question. So yeah, industry needs to keep pushing what's possible, right? That's industry's role here. And at the end of the day, the new regulations that are put out by government agencies must be met by the companies making the products, whether those are engine producers, aftertreatment companies, battery suppliers, all of these, and a combination of all of these. Of course, new technology needs to be balanced by customer acceptance and cost, right? If a customer isn't willing to buy the new technology, it doesn't really do anybody that much good. So it's a balance between industry making these improvements, but also consumers accepting these improvements. So it's really not an easy problem to solve at all. But at the end of the day, if companies keep their focus on reducing the climate impact of their vehicles and not, and this is important, not necessarily racing toward whatever the latest flashy technology is, I'm very optimistic that we will meet our decarbonization goals. And there are other initiatives that industry is working on that don't even involve necessarily the powertrain itself, right? There's a recent report that Shell put out, which had some great information. Companies working with things like aerodynamics, rolling resistance for tires, and driveline improvements can result in fuel savings of up to 27%. That's huge. Working with better route planning, platooning, and driver assistance solutions can result in fuel savings of up to 52%. So of course, we need to keep improving the powertrain. We need to look at more efficient engines, after-treatment systems, some hybridization, but we also can do these other things to result in a lot of fuel savings as well.
Okay, that's good insight, and you are clearly saying that it is in the benefit of the environment to continue improving the internal combustion engines. If we want to see benefits on the environment quickly, short-term, fast, then we need to continue improving the internal combustion engine. Okay, so now you presented the industrial side of it, so what the industry can do to contribute. What about the regulatory bodies? How can they contribute to achieve our decarbonization targets in the heavy-duty commercial vehicle segment, both on-road and off-road, of course?
Number one, the focus needs to move away from the tailpipe. That's the biggest change we can make, and that will go a long way into decarbonizing all of these sectors. Now, the biggest way that regulatory agencies can support fast decarbonization for light duty and heavy duty is to change how the regulations are done, as I just mentioned. And we need to use something called life cycle analysis. This allows you to calculate the carbon footprint from all phases of using a vehicle, right? Or a piece of construction equipment, for example, or a truck. This allows for improved engine technology using hybridization and renewable fuels to be compared fairly to battery electric or fuel cell electric vehicles. And that's really the important point here, is we want to compare these technologies fairly, an even playing field. And by focusing so much on the tailpipe, it's not a fair comparison. So we need to remove the focus from the tailpipe. I also believe very strongly that governments should revoke statements of future internal combustion engine bans. Now, whether these bans apply to only light duty or both light duty and heavy duty, it doesn't really matter, in the sense that any of these bans are very demotivating to current and future engineers. And we need these current and future engineers to keep improving the technology, because let's face it, we will need internal combustion engines for many years to come. Now, we've had tremendous success with governments setting targets over the years through regulation, as we discussed previously, both for harmful pollutants and greenhouse gases. So let's adjust our targets as we think they should be, and move forward with a system that allows the best technology to be used, depending on location and application. Okay,
thank you. That's very interesting answers and a very passionate topic. Thank you, Kelly. So if we try to close this discussion, do you have any closing comments, like the people who are watching today? What would you like them to take away from this discussion?
Yeah, I think the biggest message here is, as with passenger vehicles, there is no silver bullet when it comes to commercial heavy-duty decarbonization, and that's key. We have to do everything we can today, right? So it's great to think about a future fully renewable grid with batteries in all of our vehicles, but that's something that maybe will happen in the future. What can we do today to reduce our carbon from these vehicles as fast as possible? We can't wait for the future, right? So we must invoke all the tools in our toolbox to green up this industry. This includes electrification, more efficient combustion, cleaner fuels, and state-of-the-art after-treatment systems. So I call this all-of-above approach eclectic.
Okay, I cannot thank you enough, Kelly, for today. Thanks a lot.
Now, I hope you all enjoyed the interview as much as I did. Please allow me to just summarize my key takeaways from the interview. First of all, I think it's important to notice that the heavy-duty engines for both on-road and off-road purposes are indispensable for the way we live our lives today in the modern world. Secondly, we see that the current legislations have drastically reduced the emissions from the transport sector. And what is really needed now is to actually exchange the vehicles on the road to have the full benefit of the current legislation. Thirdly, as also stated very clearly, please remember, it's not the engine, it's the fuel. And that also that renewable fuels offer a immediate possibility to obtain some of the decarbonization goals we have for the transport sector. Now, to decarbonize the transport, we need to ensure a level playing field. And to ensure a level playing field means that we need to move away from the single look at the tailpipe and go more into life cycle analysis to ensure we understand all parts of the emissions from the transport sector. Finally, let's all remember the key takeaway. There is no silver bullet, there is no one technology. The future is eclectic.